Hello, welcome to Gin Me Live for January 2024. How you doing, Tom?
I'm pretty good, mate. I'm excellent, actually. Yeah, feeling good tonight. How about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. All good. Enjoying dry January as it goes.
Really?
Yeah. It's not been that dry, honestly. It's been very wet down here. In fact.
It's not raining.
Torrential, in fact. Anyway, we're happy to be featuring Manly in December. Manly Spirits dry gin. Everyone's probably been drinking it through the Christmas break, but we are finally in the new year managed to get a chance to actually have a tasting. We were going to be joined by David Whittaker, but instead we've got Vanessa Wilton, who's the co-founder of Manly, and she's going to be joining us to talk a little bit about Manly Gin, which is exciting because it's just a really cool Australian dry gin, and we don't see a lot of Aussie gins out here, do we?
No, not really. No, we don't. No, it's I was just sorry. I was just reading that. I've actually been to Manly, and I was just thinking about it. Then it just passed me by that I've actually been there. So I was interested when Vanessa comes on to ask her exactly whereabouts in Manly it is. I was there probably about 10 years ago. It's still in place.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's get Vanessa on. You two can talk about like your holiday and regale. It'd be uninteresting for everyone else involved, but nevertheless. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
How you doing?
Thanks so much for joining us. Because what are you like? 7 a.m. there?
We're 7 a.m. So I do have gin, but I have a coffee at the same time because a bit rude drinking at 7 a.m. gin, although it has been done.
And give us a little pan around because you gave us a pan around before.
A little pan around. I think this is to make you. I think it would make everyone jealous. I was just saying that I did live in Manly for 25 years, and then in COVID, I had one of those, COVID snaps, where you went, I just want to do everything different. So I moved onto an island in the middle of Sydney. It literally is in the middle of Sydney, called Scotland Island. And I was just saying, it's such a terrible place to live. So it's a little bit overcast today, but and there's a Christmas tree because we do that in Australia, and then we go to the beach on the same day. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I get in my little 75 horsepower little speedboat, and I fang off to the distillery every day. And people think you're crazy, but hey, I'm Australian, so
not a bad life, is it? That I mean, it's
not a bad life.
As much as I love London, it's pretty far removed from my experience of day-to-day life in London, I can tell you.
Oh, I know. And I was saying, the weather at the moment, a bit like around the world with climate change, it's all over the place. But we're, generally about 30 degrees here. Sometimes it's hitting up mid 35 Celsius, but you can get up in the mornings and we go for a swim or a surf. So not bad at all.
No, that's lovely. That is good.
Yeah, I mean, look, it sounds okay. We're quite happy with our kind of sideways rain and blowing gales here in the UK. So anyway, look.
I must admit,
it's go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying that one thing. You know how things happen in your life that you get quite inspired, and I'm sure you had all New Year's Eve a couple of days back, and I was watching fireworks further down the big Pittwater, which is this waterway down the other end off a jetty. But what was absolutely amazing is the big noises must have scared all this effervescent fish that all came around my jetty, and it's like all around the jetty was all lit up with this it's like all the stars had fallen in the sea. And I was like, well, happy 2024. If that's the start. Was quite amazing. I can't understand why they all came.
What were they doing? They were like jumping out of the water or lighting up, or what?
All everywhere, as far as I could. All around my jetty was just all this. They were little fish, I think. They didn't come up on a camera, And they were like, yeah, they were all like effervescent glow.
Amazing.
Pretty cool.
I was saying to you,
I was going to say it's probably just pollution in the water.
Probably. And a big shark.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. A load of people fishing.
Anyway, sorry, nothing about gin.
No. Well, it is interesting though. Won't go on too long about it, but I said to Tristan, I have actually been to Manly only once. I was there actually as part of my honeymoon in 2011, I think it was. And so I have a vague familiarity with what you're talking about in terms of getting boats here and there and the area. And I mean, obviously, it's for somebody who lives in London, absolutely stunning, a stunning place to be. I suppose, like anywhere, the longer you live anywhere, you get used to it, right? But from here, it's just breathtaking. So, keen to understand more about where exactly the distillery is and stuff like that. It'd be great to know that.
Sure. So Manly Spirits, the actual distillery is about 5 kilometres sort of over the hill from Manly Beach Centre, because unfortunately they don't, as most of your viewers know, you need industrial zoning to build a distillery, because your stills are like, can you imagine, giant kettles that are pressurised, so they can blow up if you don't know what you're doing. So we're in the area called Brookvale, and there's about, it's actually quite cool. It's like an industrial little hub, but there's about 8 breweries, distilleries, all within walking distance from each other. But Manly Spirits, as I said, I lived in Manly for 25 years to my little COVID little snap, and I went up the road. Was my inspiration totally behind Manly Spirits. In Australia, I guess the main aspiration is to live on the coast, right? Australia is we're a big island. I seem to have a fetish for islands, so I'm living on an island within an island. And as I said, our aspiration is all about the coast and what is produced on the coast and the lifestyle that you have on the coast. And hopefully we manage to capture that in Manly Spirits, in the liquid that we have, which uses a lot of Australian native and coastal botanicals, which I'll talk about. Also with the bottle style and the look of it and the colour and the whole vibe of what hopefully you feel when you're drinking your gin and tonic or your cocktails with Manly Spirits, which is a little bit of escapism and living on the coast in a beautiful, warm, God's country type of vibe. So, yes, distillery is that's where we are on the northern beaches of Sydney.
Nice. So what's the? Can you describe what the Australian gin scene it was like, maybe, and what it is like now, how it's evolved? Because it's all different over Europe. It's obviously it's built up a lot over the last 10 years, but at different paces in different cities and countries. So how has it felt in Australia, and what's been your sort of take on it as a gin producer?
So I'm actually the president of New South Wales, our state, of our peak body. So I have all these distilleries. We're one of the bigger ones talking to me about. Originally, I would say, 8-10 years ago, Australia was sort of behind the UK, right? It hadn't really boomed here. But like, I guess a lot what happens in Australia, we suddenly, when we take off, massive J curve. So now I'd say we have nearly 1,000 distilleries. It's massive.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just gone. Yeah, because we've been Australia has traditionally been a big wine country, and very big at producing wine and beer, which we produce for the domestic market and we export as well. Spirits took a bit longer to take on. And then with Australia, we very much Australian producers then were like, well, what can we do different that you know, it's different to what the UK does or what Spain does or France. And we very much championed what we have here was Australian natives, which are quite different. And in the Australian dry that you're drinking now, some of them you'll be like, you know, what's finger lime? You know, what's anise myrtle? And they're very typical to Australia and used a lot in Australian foods, etc. So the whole gin scene in Australia has totally exploded. A couple of years, 4 years back, I guess, maybe. Slightly petering off now, but then that's because you've got so many, and every, you know, you go to regional towns, and then it's very similar to what I believe the UK was like.
Yeah.
What a lot of our distilleries too have then combined with wineries in regional areas. So we sort of have a split between regional distilleries and urban distilleries that are found in cities. I presume the same in the UK. So we're now
we don't, of course, have the wineries to fall back on. There's not that many of them, but and not the barrels knocking about that can be used by whiskey distilleries, for example. Obviously, you've got a growing number of in Australia. Obviously, we have Scotland and the whiskey situation there, but in England we don't have that many wineries to fall back on. So there's a lot of gin distilleries. The vast majority of distilleries in England really are producing gin. In fact, there's very few distilleries in England that aren't producing gin. Some of them might be making rum and whiskey and some other stuff as well, but most of them are making gin. Quintessentially British, and even more so perhaps English spirit.
Yeah. What's Vanessa, I was going to ask you in terms of the way people are consuming it, because obviously you'd make the assumption with the amazing climate and surroundings and beaches and everything else that an ice cold gin and tonic would seem like the sort of perfect beverage to have, although you probably have to drink it pretty quickly before all the ice has melted and it warms up. How are people drinking gin in Australia and around Manly?
I still think we are in Australia. Gin is predominantly still consumed as a gin and tonic. It's moving. People are a lot drinking gin with soda as well in this country because of everyone's, you know, weight conscious and stuff. The cocktail scene is good. It's not as good as the UK though. That's one thing you've got up on us. And you've got amazing bartenders. You know, I mean, I love my venue manager, and she's a pom, thank God. And you know, and my sales manager, he's a pom. Oh, I should say English, shouldn't I? Sorry, British. British. Yeah, I love. The British have a good grasp of drinks and mixing drinks and mixology and stuff, and they're great workers. So we love employing them. So if anyone wants a job,
I might head out there actually.
So,
that sounds pretty good.
But I always talk about. I mean, we do a whole range of gins. Way too many actually for every type of occasion. We've got a gin that goes in a sort of we call it a gin colada. We've got other gins that we think are more so suited to, you know, like Floridora cocktails. But the Australian Dry, my firstborn, is genuinely still my favorite. Okay, it's a fantastic martini drinking gin, if that makes sense, right? It's full of so much. It's so well balanced. And with interesting, still like a classic gin, but with I call it, you know, Australian twist, that I don't want to put anything else with it. So I sort of have it gin with a waft of vermouth. No, I shouldn't say that. It has a little bit more. So it sounds like I'm alcoholic drinking straight gin. Woo!
Well, you know, the thing about martinis is if you put less vermouth in there, it's actually. Like, it seems like that you like stronger drinks, but of course more vermouth means there's actually more alcohol in there, you know.
Well, actually, exactly.
Yeah. It might be more dilute, but there's still more booze in there at the end of the day, right?
Yes, that's right. And I do dilute with some ice, you know, when we're making them.
Yeah.
pour it in a glass and go martini. Well, that does.
Yeah.
So as you said, the way it's consumed a lot in Australia is if you're doing al fresco dining or meeting with friends or outside dinner parties, barbecues, gin and tonics type thing. A lot of the bar scene will be serving it in martinis, which sort of have really taken off. They've had a come back in fashion, which is very exciting. But yeah, so
how do you recommend you garnish martini with Manly gin? Is there a specific? Do you do twist or olive, or is there something different?
I still like doing a lemon twist, getting that slight oils across your martini. What Australian gins do, and especially ours, they're so full of flavour because we do quite high concentration when we're making our gin. Like we don't dilute back when we're making it. So they are full of flavour. So for my palate, I'm still with my martinis. I still like my lemon twist. For me, if I'm making a gin and tonic, I tend to put an orange slice with this because it does use orange in it. So, but you can still use a traditional lime. Cucumber. Hendrix can have their cucumber. We tend to do a citrus goes because this is still quite a citrus forward, like a traditional style gin.
I have to say, even sipping it just neat, not even in a cocktail, which obviously is not. There aren't many gins. There aren't many people that drink gin like that. Full stop. Obviously, I've not come across many. And not only that, there are a lot of gins that you wouldn't comfortably be able to do that with and sit there at room temperature, just sip the gin as it is. And I've sat here sipping that, and I have to say, I think it's delightful and sweet, nicely sweetly balanced and citrus, and really, really lovely. So, although I'll be honest, I haven't made a martini with it yet, but that might come after this, broadcast. Can you imagine how delicious that would be? Because it is fantastic.
Vanessa, can you? So you mentioned already. I think there's 2 or 3 kind of native botanicals in there. Finger lime. Do you want to talk us through those and give us some kind of impression on what they are comparable to and perhaps more common ingredients in Europe?
Yep. So what we did. So when we went to make a gin, right? You have to be. I think reflect your terroir of where you are. You need to have a point of difference and be authentic to where you are, which is Northern Beaches and in Australia. So when we tried to construct Manly Spirits, we started off, thank you, British, UK, POMs, what do we call you, giving us how to make a good, so Angelica, orris root, juniper berries, give yourself a really good foundation. Then we decided to turn things on their head and use what is typical to us. So I think what a lot of people go, they read it and they go, look at the label and they go, sea lettuce. What the hell's sea lettuce? Again, slight umami. We actually get it just about 5 minutes drive down to Freshwater Beach and Curl. It's another beach, headland, where it's just all growing on the rock shelf at low tide. It's like a seaweed algae. Looks like it's a luscious, vivid green. And a lot of fishermen use it, blackfish, when they're fishing. So we put a bit of that in it because it's very much part of our DNA of being on the coast and who we are.
It sounds a bit like Sunfire.
We get Sandfire. Sandfire's more that little thin. That's a little bit more sort of salty. Well, salty. Yeah. This is a little bit more umami, a little bit more
savory.
Savory. But look, as we all know, gin is all about It's like making a perfume that you can drink. And it's all about balance, isn't it? Right? So you have all your, citrus, floral, a sweet, sour, umami, all balanced properly. Otherwise, it is like drinking a perfume, which is disgusting. So a good gin, I believe, and this one's won double gold at San Francisco and golds everywhere over the years, is because it is quite balanced.
Yeah.
But let me go. I'm getting sidetracked, which I easily do. Then there's what we put in it. You may see, you go anise myrtle. That's a bit like star anise in Europe. But in Australia, it's an Australian native. And the myrtle family has, it's quite extensive. We use cinnamon myrtle in another gin that we've got. We use lemon myrtle in our coastal citrus gin. And in this gin, we use our anise myrtle. Incredibly, it's quite a tough plant, as in I managed to kill so many plants. We had them at our distillery in our gin garden out the front. And
didn't kill that
I haven't killed it. I know. And I can see why. Well, it's an Australian native, and it has evolved to survive, I guess, our weather conditions better than I managed to destroy lavender even, but anyway. So, but the anise myrtle is still there. I remember bringing one of these plants back down from Byron Bay, that you guys may have heard of Byron Bay. Because my dad had a property up there growing coffee and macadamias, and a little anise myrtle bush. And that was 8 years ago. So I love my anise myrtle that's grown near the front door of the distillery. So, and then what we also do is the lime component, we put in finger lime, which again is an awesome ingredient. I always call it's like caviar, little lime caviar. These little, do you get finger lime a lot in the UK?
No, I don't see it. We don't see it much here. I know what you mean, though. I've seen them.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures. They have sort of like this little spheres inside. Is that correct? Or
yeah.
what?
So it's like, if you can imagine like caviar, these little bubbles, and they're full of lime. Like really, they look. If you want to do a really elegant sort of gin, you go into town, like a gin cocktail spritz, with gin and prosecco, like a French 75 or something. Putting some of those all on the top are amazing. But anyway, the plant is like it's about as long as a finger, a bit wider, like a man's finger. Consequently, why it's called finger lime. And then you open it up, and it has all the little lime pods inside. What we do is we then they're dehydrated, and we use that we then put in our gin, which gives it that citrus component.
And is there a peel to the lime as well that is a component of that as well, or is it more about the flesh on the inside?
No, it's the inside. It's the lime on the inside. Okay. So it's a horrible little bush. Like, it's a bit like, how, I don't know if your guests have seen, juniper bushes. They're horrible bushes. They're prickly and they're, the finger lime's a bit like that as well. I think it's got the goods. So it's got all little spikes and spines all over the plant. So it's a bit of a pain to. It's not. It's a bit like a rose. You have a beautiful rose, and it's got all these thorns.
Are they by hand, or are they mechanically harvested now? I mean, generally speaking,
I think
you can't really mechanically harvest.
They might have little. The bushes aren't really that high. I've been up to some of the plantations up at Byron Bay, or Hinterland Byron Bay. I think they still hand. Depends how big. How big the operations are, but they tend to be sort of more horticultural, smaller scale. But yeah, I guess you just have big thick gloves on, and they're used a lot in fine dining. They use for and used on seafood for decorating because they give that big lime punch.
I've never seen anywhere generally to purchase in the UK. I've never stumbled into even some of the more sort of boutique grocers. I've never stumbled across them and gone, I've never really seen them. I think more in sort of restaurant dishes or that sort of thing. Quite specialist, which is surprising really, because you think, I imagine in the UK that they're not cheap to get hold of. And so it's quite an exotic ingredient, really, isn't it, to put into a gin?
Oh yeah, we're very exotic gin guys.
Taste
that. But then, and as I say, other things. The last unique one, I guess, is the mountain pepper leaf. So I have an awesome friend who started Lark Distillery in Tasmania, Kirsty Lark, and she always goes, she's Tasmanian, she goes, oh, we invented using pepper leaf. And I said, no, you did the pepper berry. We decided to go for the leaf. She's a great mate of mine. We spend a lot of time with each other. We decided to use the leaf. And again, it gives that slight, when you try your gin, there's how a gin has to have a finish. There's a little bit of a peppery to it. Again, another Australian native. The berry we use as well, not in this one though, is pretty cool. So,
do you distill all of these ingredients together, or are there different considerations for each one, or was everything with the juniper, all of it in one hit? So
again, what we do is the London Dry style, where as you say, it's all with. We do a whole range of gins. Some of them we do different. This way, what we wanted to do was, it's a bit like being an artist, isn't it? You've got to learn to be able to draw, paint in perspective. Then you can go all abstract. We wanted to be able to make a gin the traditional way, which was putting everything in the pot together, which is quite hard because you've got to be able to get all your balances right. And once we had mastered that and set ourselves on the world stage, then we could go out and do our compound gins.
I remember a little bit,
whatever. So the way we make this gin, we put everything in the still all at the same time. We started that way, and we've kept the recipe the same way to make this gin. So, you have to get it right the first time, otherwise you just get.
And are any of you? I'm sure you've covered this. We've talked about a few of the native botanicals. I know that you said some of them are dried, but are all of them dried, or are some of them in their fresh form when they go in there?
So, some are in their fresh form, like the sea lettuce is in its fresh form. That's always fun to go and harvest or get that. It's like going and getting scissors and cutting grass, except you're doing it on a rock shelf, and you just have to make sure that it's a low tide, only about, say, a 1 foot swell or less. Otherwise, you'll end up. We have had a distiller who actually was an English guy who wasn't watching those conditions, and he shredded he didn't wear his boots. He doesn't wear his boots on a rock shelf.
Was that Tim?
That was Tim. And
we know Tim.
Yeah. And he shredded, at least he had his commitment. He tried to hold on to his tub of sea lettuce as a big wave came crashing in. It did take the sea lettuce in the end. And it dragged him along, and he shredded all his feet. And then it looked like a mass murder because he'd borrowed our car, and he got back in the car and he had blood all over where your pedals are and the well everywhere. And he was in crutches for 2 weeks. So, but the aim of the story is the only people who ever go and do get our sea lettuce now are either Dave, myself, or our adult kids who are surfers, because one, they won't sue us. Two, they're all used they're used to conditions because we're both lifesavers and surfers and stuff. So you understand waves. They always come in sets. So, and generally look at your weather conditions and go and get your sea lettuce when it's low tide. Never take it out from the roots, so it'll be there back again. So it's like grass. So you sort of break off the tops, and then it'll be there to share with everyone next time. I'm trying to remember what the original question was.
It was just about which ones were dry and which ones were fresh.
Yeah, so sea lettuce.
Right.
Again, as we were saying, we put orange in, so that's fresh again. Some of the others we have to, just to be able to have consistency and to be able to provide all the year round, because say finger lime is seasonal. So if you don't have it dried, then you're sort of, and this is one of our best sellers called gins. So I need it to be available
all year round, and make it all year round.
Yeah, and to be able to be sent to the UK to share the love.
Exactly. We're very grateful for that. Tom, are you going to make a cocktail using it?
I am. I'm going to make a drink. And it's interesting actually what you were saying. So I'm just going to drain the water out of my glass, because the drink that I'm going to make, although it is a slight twist on the drink that we recommended for this gin, which is a Ricky, is quite fitting actually to what you were describing around the sort of drinking habits, and how people are, maybe a little bit more health conscious now and want a lighter drink, mixing it with soda as opposed to say tonic water or something that maybe contains sugar. And so, the Ricky is a fantastic version of that. And I think it works very, very well with this gin. Now, one caveat to it is that normally a Ricky would be made with lime or fresh lime, or traditionally, and it obviously can be made with pretty much any spirit. It's a very, very simple drink, which always goes down the lines of, what we try to talk about on these tastings, because I guess, our main purpose for being is to try and get more people drinking gin. And in order to do that, it needs to be drinks that people can actually make at home and from ingredients that they can buy anywhere, as opposed to it being something that's, a little bit more complex and hard to get hold of. So for this one, I'm using lemon juice, or a squeeze of lemon in this one with the Manly as opposed to lime. And I've also taken the liberty of adding, I'm going to add a couple of dashes of coriander bitters in there as well, which, whilst I believe aren't botanicals within the actual the product itself, is going to add a little bit more of that sort of spicy citrus to that drink as well. And then what we're doing is, with a Ricky, we're topping it with soda, as opposed to say tonic water or ginger ale or something else similar. So I'm going to start with a highball, if I can open these bitters, which you can probably see there. And again, it's all built in the glass. I'm just going to add over that 2 or 3 drops of coriander bitters. I'm going to add in there a measure. I'm going to go in this glass probably about 35 millilitres of the Manly dry gin. And I'm going to hand squeeze in there a bit of citrus, as I say, in this case, lemon. Traditionally, it would have been lime, but I'm just going to add that in there like so. And quite simply top this with some soda water, or what could be club soda, basically. So you've got a drink, again, very simple, very easy, very light, certainly more fitting to the weather and the climate that you've got there this time of year for you guys, as opposed to here where, it's nearing on 2-3 degrees. And absolutely belting it down outside. So it's probably not the time to drink that I'd traditionally go for, on a cold January evening. But nonetheless, it works incredibly well with the Manly dry gin. And again, very simple, very easy, very light. It can also be batched as well. And you'll notice one of the other big differences is the omission of any sugars in there.
Yeah,
you do see some recipes that add a touch of sugar, or a little bit of sugar in there. Personally, I think you're verging a little bit more on sort of a Collins, or moving towards a different style of drink if you're doing that. And I think a very classic style with no sugar in there, just citrus, obviously the gin, and I've added in there just the bitters, just to add a little bit of a third dimension in there. creates a really simple, delicate, and fantastic drink. So there we have the gin Ricky, or a twist on. Cheers.
Nice.
Cheers.
Cheers. And I think sometimes a little bit of salt in a Ricky's nice as well. And I think that might play it nicely with some of the maritime qualities of Manly gin, right?
Yeah, that would have been really good, actually.
I'm not saying you messed it up there, Tom. That was a great drink.
No, you're right. I'm a little bit, I'm a bit frustrated. I hadn't thought of that, because you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is that when you don't have the addition of sugar in there, something like a dash of a salt solution, or even just a tiny pinch of salt in there, actually acts to bind all the ingredients together and give it, in a strange way, almost a bit more of a heavy mouthfeel. Because obviously a drink that is basically spirit, citrus, and soda can be quite thin and quite light, which is can be a great thing. I enjoy it, but I think just a touch of salt just rounds it off, and it brings out all of those flavors.
Also, in the way that, if you think about the way that sugar is used to balance acidity, salt actually kind of does the same thing. And it's a strange concept, because everyone thinks of salt and acid being sort of separate from one another. But actually, if you add salt to something that tastes sour, it doesn't have to be a drink. It can be anything. It will dial down the acidity of it slightly. Of course, it will up the salinity of it a little bit. But if you don't add too much, then there can be a really nice balance found there.
It's one of those ones you've got to be really careful with, right? Obviously, with playing around with salt it can be very easy to ruin a drink.
Yeah,
I think we both, over the years, I think we've both had a fair few drinks that have had salt in them that have gone a little bit too far with it, and there's no coming back from it. That's the problem. It's like, when it's too much, it's too much. But just the right amount, or even just under, it's fine if you're a little bit under, but just the right amount can really bring a lot to a drink. And it's not even drinks like citrus-based drinks, drinks that are more bitter as well.
We make Manly Spirits make a coffee liqueur, and we actually add in salt water that we've dehydrated to actually get the salt. We actually harvest because, like you have in, when you put, salted chocolate, because it actually is like a flavor enhancer. So we actually put it in our products sometimes.
Fantastic.
Salt kind of improves the flavor of pretty much anything up to a point. And the point depends on what it is you're flavoring. But it will universally improve flavor. There's literally nothing apart from something that's already too salty that won't benefit from a little bit of salt. And sometimes a lot of salt is actually really good. Obviously we're not dietitians or physicians here. We're not trying to advise you on your blood pressure. We're just trying to tell you what tastes good, okay?
And the one thing I didn't mention before, but everyone, and I back home always asks about when they look at the bottle. That's the beautiful thing about spirits, and especially gin, compared to wine bottles. Wine bottles all tend to be, sort of similar, where spirits have gone very creative with all your bottles, right? Everyone, and their bottles reflect what their product is and where they're from. And everyone always goes, "Oh, what's the little fish scales?" And I go, "Well, they can be fish scales for you, but they're not actually fish scales. Actually, it can be whatever you want. It's actually the Fibonacci sequence."
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, which is, is pattern in nature, which represents, perfection and balance, right? So, like you look at the center of a sunflower, or they've done the mathematical equation of a wave. So to me, I decided to put this on our bottle because gin is all about balance. It's all about having all your sweet, like you've been talking about, salt and sweet and sour and botanicals. Like you don't want a gin that's over the top floral, because you just can't drink more than one. Or you don't want a gin that is so heavy, like over the top in anise myrtle, because it'll be like drinking ouzo, like because it's got that slight liquid taste to it. So that's what the little pattern actually is.
It makes sense, yeah. And then also with the maritime qualities of your gin, I can understand why people think fish scales.
Yeah,
as well, right?
yeah, and that's cool. And the logo, which is a fish in a barrel. Now the fish is actually one of my other passions is scuba diving, and I'm a lover, not a killer. So I like looking at the fish. I'm not very good at fishing. And it's actually the eastern blue devilfish, which is just endemic to just off the coast of New South Wales. It's rare and endangered. So if I see anyone spearfishing it and putting it up on Instagram, I'll hunt you down. And it's in a barrel, right? Because that represents what we are. We are a spirits distillery. From day one, we've been making. We do barrel-aged gin, where we age our gin in whiskey barrels. We also produce whiskey under the brand Coastal Stone. So Manly Spirits is all about sea, coast, fish. We don't put any fish in our gins. Not yet, anyway. And I don't think that'd be too good. But anyway.
Never know.
You never know, though. You never know. So put my favourite fish in the barrel on our logo. So
how do you find how do you find two questions, if you don't mind, Vanessa. First is what's your sort of biggest market for this particular gin? Is it Australia, or is it in terms of sales? Where's it popular?
Yeah. So even though we export, UK, but we export to the US and other little places. I still believe our biggest market is Australia. You have to own your own backyard, if that makes sense. So our biggest market is Australia. Our biggest in the US, believe it or not, in espresso martinis, our coffee liqueur is massive.
Yeah.
So you got to work out what markets.
This is the benefit of having a diverse portfolio.
Yeah, diverse portfolio. So I think we've even exported. Well, I think it's pretty cool is to be able to export what British UK have been known for, which is gin, and be able to take something with a bit of a twist back to the mother country, and be really well received. So
it definitely does that, doesn't it? It tells I mean, like you say, the bottle, the glass color, everything, the imagery, the art, the art on it, and everything else tells a huge story. It's interesting, for that to be sat on a shelf, let's say in a Selfridges or in somewhere in London or somewhere else, it's bringing a whole culture in place, which is quite fascinating, really, because there's a lot more to it than really would first meet the eye when you look at it. Obviously, it's a very striking bottle, but there's so much going on in that bottle that you wouldn't necessarily, you take a bit to think about, wouldn't you, and understand about.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It's I was very fortunate. My background was a branding designer before I slightly diversified into being a booze queen, and I was really lucky that I spent a lifetime designing brands for other people, from toys to books to you name it. And I finally got to actually design something for myself. And I just captured everything that I love in a bottle. You know what I mean? I love gin. I was a yachty, and that the only thing that used to be on the boat was beer and gin, because gin didn't go off, it was left in the bottle. And I managed to capture, I believe I'm incredibly fortunate that I was brought up on the northern beaches. I get to swim, scuba dive. I'm a bit of an urban hippie, and I tried to capture all those things in a well-balanced, well-constructed gin portfolio. So Manly Spirits was born. You know, I even painted the front door of my house was turquoise. It's sad, isn't it? Anyway, but you know, so yeah, it was pretty easy because I just put everything I loved.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yep. Didn't come out of an ad agency. It just came out.
No, well, like you say, I mean, it's a very handy skill to have, isn't it, when you're building your own brand?
Yeah.
When you're not necessarily being driven by somebody else's brief, the creativity must be quite eye-opening when you start to go, right, well, actually, I can do almost anything I want. You know. And
it's a sign of madness because you start battling with yourself.
Yeah.
What do you think, Vanessa? I have no idea, Vanessa. So, and so it's fortunate that my other half is a chemical engineer. I call him my enabler. He doesn't quite like that. And I come up with a lot of far-fetched ideas, and he helps make them happen, being a background of I guess making ethanol for cars and jet planes. So we just converted those skills into food grade products. And
it makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and still managed to stay married. That's a big achievement, running a distillery.
Yeah, indeed. Well, just doing that even without a business is a pretty good achievement, right? Especially with kids. But well, look, cool. That's amazing. Thanks so much. And it's great to have you on as well because I mean, our Jinmi members who are watching this or who will watch this in the future are obviously familiar with Manly now. But of course, we did feature Coastal Stone over at Whiskey Me a few months back, and we got Dave on to talk about the distillery. And it's fascinating because you're both very insightful and interesting, and you both have quite different stories to tell about the products and how they're made and everything. Because obviously, like you say, you come from an advertising and marketing background, and it's from a chemical engineering background. So I feel like between the two of you, we've got a really complete story of what you're doing with the gin and with the whiskey and with some of the wider products as well. So thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. And well, yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in, and for everyone who will tune in over the next few days and to watch this. And Tom, thanks for the drink. Thanks for the cocktail.
Yes. That's right. I got to drink it, so I have to thank myself.
Cool. And Vanessa, thanks again for joining us.
Pleasure.
Cheers, Vanessa. Thank you.